In June 2019, 911 received call from Atlanta, Georgia. The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless, barely coherent. "There's blood. So much blood. She's not breathing." By the time first responders arrived at the upscale home on Pinecrest Drive, the scene inside was something out of a nightmare. Anna Thompson, 34, was sprawled across the living room floor, her lifeless body drenched in deep crimson. A shattered wineglass lay nearby, its fragments glinting under the dim glow of a flickering chandelier. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife, was still clutched in her hand. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic domestic dispute gone horribly wrong. But as detectives combed through the evidence, it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary crime. This was something far more sinister. Investigators soon uncovered a tangled web of deception, a love triangle riddled with betrayal, secrets buried for years, and a vendetta that had been quietly brewing beneath the surface. A hidden affair, a second weapon, a past that refused to stay buried. What really happened that night? Who had truly orchestrated Anna Thompson's final moments? And was the real killer hiding in plain sight all along? As the case unraveled, one chilling truth became undeniable. This was never just about love. This was about revenge, and someone had waited a long time to strike. Anna Thompson had always believed in love, the kind that was unwavering, built on trust, and immune to the cracks that so often split marriages apart. At 34, she had what many envied: a devoted husband, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a best friend she could confide in about anything. From the outside, her life seemed almost picture-perfect, the kind of happiness people aspired to. But perfection is often an illusion, and Anna had no idea that hers was on the verge of crumbling. Daniel Thompson was the kind of man who made a lasting impression. At 36, he carried himself with the effortless charm of someone used to admiration. He was successful, well-dressed, and always knew the right thing to say. To Anna, he was more than just a husband. He was her anchor, the person she had built her life around. Their marriage had been filled with laughter and whispered promises, but somewhere along the way, those moments had started to feel scripted, rehearsed, as if Daniel were playing a role instead of living it. Then there was Lisa Carter, Anna's best friend since college. They had met when they were both struggling students, sharing secrets over cheap coffee and late-night study sessions. Over the years, their bond had deepened, turning into something unshakable. Or so Anna had thought. Lisa had been there through everything: Anna's wedding, her triumphs, her heartbreaks. She was the one person Anna never questioned, never doubted. But trust is a fragile thing, and Lisa had been keeping a secret that could destroy everything. For months, Anna had ignored the small signs: the late nights Daniel spent at the office, the unexplained absences, the way Lisa would hesitate before answering certain questions. She had chalked it up to paranoia, to stress. Love, after all, required faith. But faith can be a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. Behind closed doors, Daniel and Lisa had been entangled in a betrayal so deep that it had become second nature to them. Their stolen moments, their whispered conversations, their secret rendezvous, all hidden beneath layers of deceit. They had convinced themselves that they were careful, that Anna would never suspect. But lies have a way of unraveling, no matter how tightly they are woven. Anna had started to sense the shift, though she hadn't wanted to admit it to herself. Daniel had grown distant, his once affectionate gestures now mechanical. Lisa, too, had changed, avoiding eye contact, deflecting conversations, always seeming to be somewhere else, even when she was right there beside Anna. The truth had been lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it finally did, it wouldn't come as a quiet realization. It would come as an explosion, one that would end in blood, in shattered trust, in irreversible loss. Anna had spent years believing that love was unbreakable. What she didn't know was that sometimes The deepest wounds are inflicted by the people we trust the most. And soon, she would come face to face with that reality in the most brutal way possible. Doubt had a way of creeping in like an unwanted guest, settling in the corners of Anna's mind, whispering suspicions she didn't want to believe. At first, she dismissed it, told herself she was imagining things. But the signs were there, subtle yet undeniable. The way Daniel's phone always seemed to be face down on the table, the way he would step outside to take calls that used to happen in front of her, the way his once reassuring touch had started to feel distant, like a man going through the motions rather than a husband in love. Lisa had changed too. The woman who had once shared every detail of her life with Anna had become strangely reserved. She cancelled plans at the last minute, avoided long conversations, and seemed to fumble for words when Anna asked innocent questions. It was as if a wall had been built between them, one Anna hadn't noticed until it was too tall to climb. Then there were the late nights. Daniel had always worked long hours, but lately there had been more of them. Business trips that felt unnecessary, unexplained absences that stretched longer than they should. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers lingering on his shirt. The text messages he received late at night, brief, quickly dismissed, his phone slipping back into his pocket before Anna could catch a glimpse. Doubt turned into unease. Unease turned into suspicion. One evening, as Daniel showered, Anna found herself standing over his phone, heart pounding, hands trembling. She knew she shouldn't invade his privacy. She knew this could be the moment that changed everything. But the fear of the unknown was worse than the truth she was about to uncover. The messages were there, undeniable, explicit, filled with passion and longing. And the name attached to them sent a shiver down Anna's spine. Lisa. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It wasn't just a meaningless mistake. It had been going on for months. Every stolen glance, every hushed conversation, every excuse. It had all been leading to this. Her husband, the man she had trusted with her life, her best friend, the woman she had considered family. Together. Betrayal hit like a physical blow. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she scrolled through the messages, seeing her life unravel in front of her. Words meant for someone else. Promises Daniel had made, not to his wife, but to her best friend. The weight of deception settled heavy in Anna's chest, but it wasn't just sadness that consumed her. It was something darker, a storm of emotions she had never felt before. Humiliation, anger, heartbreak, all merging into something dangerous. She felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. Every moment she had defended them in her own mind, dismissed her instincts, convinced herself she was imagining things. It all felt like a cruel joke now. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She wouldn't. Betrayal like this didn't just disappear into the background. It demanded confrontation, and Anna was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The night was thick with tension, the kind that suffocates, that presses down on the walls until they feel like they're closing in. The house, once filled with warmth and familiarity, now felt like a battleground. Shadows stretched long across the dimly lit living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the silence, until it wasn't silent anymore. The confrontation had been inevitable. Anna couldn't keep the truth locked inside, couldn't pretend her world hadn't just shattered beyond repair. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation, it all boiled to the surface as she stood before the two people who had betrayed her in the worst way possible. Lisa's face was pale, her hands clutching at the hem of her dress as if she could shrink under Anna's burning gaze. Daniel stood rigid, caught between guilt and panic, his jaw tightening with every passing second. Neither of them spoke first. They didn't need to. The weight of the moment pressed down like an unbearable force, threatening to crack the very foundation of the lives they had built on deceit. Then it erupted. A scream, raw, guttural, echoed through the house, shaking the walls with its fury. Accusations spilled out like venom, each word dripping with the agony of betrayal. Anna's voice trembled, but not with fear, with rage. Every suppressed doubt, every ignored instinct, every moment she had blamed herself instead of seeing the truth came pouring out like a dam finally breaking. Daniel tried to reason, but his words were empty, hollow apologies laced with desperation. Lisa stepped forward, but the movement only fueled the fire inside Anna. The betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a complete dismantling of everything she had ever believed in. The tension became unbearable. A chair tipped over, crashing to the floor. A wine glass slipped from someone's grasp, shattering into jagged shards across the hardwood. Footsteps pounded, frantic movements fueled by adrenaline. Anna's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Was she calling the police? A friend? Anyone who could anchor her in this moment? Then, a blur of movement, a struggle, hands grasping, pushing, shoving, a flash of silver, the gleam of a knife catching the dim glow of the overhead light. For a moment, everything stood still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a single second, it shattered. A gasp, a sharp intake of breath as flesh gave way to steel. Lisa staggered backward, her hands flying to her stomach, fingers coated in crimson. The color spread like ink through fabric, staining, consuming. Her eyes, wide, disbelieving, locked onto Anna's for a fleeting moment, as if searching for an explanation, an undoing of what had just been done. Then she collapsed. Blood pooled across the floor, seeping into the cracks of the wooden panels, dark and unforgiving. The air was thick with something indescribable, fear, shock, finality. Anna's own breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at her trembling hands, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The knife, slick with blood, clattered onto the floor beside Lisa's still body. Daniel stood frozen, his face drained of color, his body rigid with shock. His gaze flickered from Lisa to Anna, horror twisting his features. He took a step forward, then hesitated, as if realizing that nothing he did could change what had just happened. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, a sound growing louder, closer, piercing the suffocating silence that had settled over the house like a death shroud. The nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. The wail of sirens pierced the still night, a haunting melody of approaching judgment. Red and blue lights danced across the walls of the quiet suburban neighborhood, casting eerie shadows on the pristine lawns. What had once been an ordinary home, a symbol of stability and love, was now a crime scene. The police arrived in a flurry of controlled chaos. Officers stormed through the front door, their boots clicking against the hardwood, their voices sharp and demanding. But nothing could have prepared them for the scene inside. Daniel stood motionless, his face drained of all color. His hands, sticky, trembling, were painted in deep crimson. Blood stained his shirt, his skin pooling in dark patches beneath him. His wide, unfocused eyes darted between the officers and the body on the floor, as if struggling to comprehend whether this was reality or a nightmare. Lisa was slumped against the couch, her breath coming in uneven, shuddering gasps. Her own hands were trembling violently, her fingers stained where she had tried, uselessly, to stem the bleeding. Her clothes were disheveled, her hair wild, her entire body still trapped in the moment that had shattered everything. And then there was Anna, motionless, lifeless, the pool of blood around her spreading, soaking into the floorboards. The metallic scent of it hung heavy in the air, clinging to the walls, seeping into the very foundation of the home where she had once felt safe. The officers moved quickly. Standard protocol: secure the scene, check for weapons, question the witnesses. But this case wasn't going to be simple. Who had struck first? The weapon, a bloodied knife, lay discarded near Anna's body, its blade catching the dim glow of the overhead lights. One officer carefully bagged it as evidence, while another took stock of the room: a shattered wine glass, a toppled chair, a cracked picture frame lying face down on the floor. Signs of a struggle were everywhere, but no clear answers emerged. Neighbors, drawn by the flashing lights, gathered in clusters on the sidewalk, whispering, speculating. Some had heard the shouting earlier, the raised voices cutting through the quiet night like a blade. But no one had seen what actually happened. It was all a blur of muffled cries and crashing objects, a violent crescendo that had ended in silence. Daniel was the first to be led outside, his hands shaking as an officer guided him toward a waiting patrol car. His mind was a whirlwind of shock, grief, and something deeper, something darker. His clothes, his face, everything about him screamed guilt. But was he the aggressor, or was he simply caught in the aftermath of something far more sinister? Lisa was taken in next, wrapped in a thin blanket, though the chill that had settled in her bones wouldn't be warmed by fabric alone. She hadn't spoken a word since the officers arrived, her gaze fixed on nothing, her mind lost somewhere in the depths of the past few minutes. Then came the first twist. As officers documented the crime scene, they found something that made them pause. A second knife, untouched by blood, hidden beneath the couch. A spare weapon, a failed attempt at defense, or evidence that more had happened here than anyone was letting on. The investigation took a sharp turn. If this had been an impulsive act of rage, why the presence of a second weapon? Was it premeditated? Or was there an unseen element to this crime that had yet to reveal itself? The detectives exchanged glances, understanding passing between them. The case had just become far more complicated. The body was carefully transported from the scene, but the stain of what had happened would never truly be erased. The home, the memories, the relationships. It was all tainted now, irreversibly marked by betrayal, rage, and death. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Who was truly responsible? And had the real story even been told yet? The courtroom was silent, thick with tension. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the weight of the crime itself had settled over the room. Every eye was fixed on the defendant's chair, where Daniel Thompson sat, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. Across from him, Lisa Carter, the best friend turned suspect, sat rigid, her gaze locked on the polished wooden floor, as if looking up would shatter whatever fragile composure she had left. The prosecution had painted Daniel as a man consumed by guilt, a husband whose affair had spiraled out of control, leading to a fatal confrontation. The defense, however, had woven a different story, one that pointed to Lisa as the mastermind, the woman who had orchestrated everything from the shadows. The evidence was as tangled as the betrayal that had led to Anna's murder. The knife, the hidden second weapon, the blood-stained fingerprints, all of it told conflicting stories. The forensic reports confirmed that Anna had fought back. But against whom? Lisa had bruises, Daniel had wounds, but the truth still felt just out of reach. And then came the twist, one that shattered every assumption made up until this moment. The prosecution introduced new evidence, a forensic report that had previously gone unnoticed. A strand of hair, found clenched between Anna's fingers, did not belong to Daniel or Lisa. It belonged to someone else entirely. The courtroom erupted. Gasps filled the air. Whispers spread like wildfire. A new name was introduced into the case. Someone no one had suspected. It was Lisa's ex-boyfriend, a man who had been lurking in the background of her life, watching, waiting. Their relationship had ended badly, with Lisa leaving him for Daniel, but it seemed he had never truly left her life. Witnesses were called. Neighbors recalled seeing a shadowy figure lurking near Anna's house on the night of the murder. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed an unfamiliar car parked just a block away, its headlights cutting through the darkness moments before the crime. And then, the final, devastating revelation. Lisa had known. She had known he was watching her, had known he was still obsessed. And yet, she had done nothing. Or perhaps she had done something far worse. She had used him. The theory unfolded with chilling precision. Had Lisa manipulated her ex into eliminating the one obstacle between her and Daniel? Had she lured Anna into the confrontation, knowing it would turn deadly? Or had she simply stood by, waiting for fate to take its course? The prosecution pressed harder. If Lisa wasn't guilty of murder, was she guilty of conspiracy? Had she set this tragedy in motion, ensuring that in the end, Anna would be gone, and Daniel would be left broken, vulnerable, and completely in her grasp? The jury deliberated for hours. The evidence was circumstantial, but the implications were too dark to ignore. Finally, the verdict was read. Daniel was acquitted. His crime had been passion, not premeditation. The court ruled that he had acted in self-defense during the struggle. He was free to go, but his freedom came at a cost. The woman he had loved was dead, his reputation was ruined, and his soul was scarred beyond repair. Lisa, however, was not so lucky. She was found guilty of manslaughter and criminal negligence. The court couldn't prove murder, but it was clear that she had played a dangerous game, one that had cost Anna her life. As the judge's gavel fell, Lisa remained still, her face unreadable. Did she regret it, or had she planned this all along? The case was closed, but the truth remained elusive. Who had truly killed Anna Thompson? A lover, a scorned ex, a best friend with a hidden agenda? Perhaps the real answer would never be known. Justice had been served, but whether it was the right kind of justice, that was a question no one could answer. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more stories about betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.